Joe Hopkins here, and today I'm doing a video about Les Paul. Who was Les Paul? Everybody knows the guitar, the Gibson Les Paul, right? But Les Paul was a dude. In case anybody didn't know, some of you guys might know some of this stuff. Some of you might not. Les Paul was born Lester Pulsfuss. You can see the reason for the stage name, right? He was a guitarist. The guitar we see today, the Gibson Les Paul, is actually, I believe, the first signature guitar. So when you see signature guitars, his was the first. When you see the slash signature Les Paul, that's like a signature guitar on a signature guitar. Kind of redundant. But anyway, Les Paul, he was a guitarist. And if he had only been a guitarist, we probably wouldn't remember him as much now. But he started out as a guitarist, initially playing country music under various stage names. Red Hot Red, Red Rhubarb, I think was one of his names. Had a couple stage names, right? Back in the 30s. And in the 40s, he got into jazz. Married a woman named Iris Summers, who changed her name to Mary Ford. And if you look up stuff on YouTube, you can find some Les Paul and Mary Ford videos. Because they had a TV show, they had a radio show. They worked with Bing Crosby and a lot of other famous artists at the time. And you might find some clips of them on YouTube and see that Les Paul wasn't just a guitarist, he was an amazing guitarist who has influenced just about everybody since. Even if they don't know that it's Les Paul that influenced them, chances are you've been influenced by a guitarist who was influenced by a guitarist who was influenced by Les Paul. The man was incredibly influential in music, but that wasn't his biggest contribution. If you own a solid body electric guitar, you can thank Les Paul because he pretty much invented that. Which is why his name is on the Gibson Les Paul. That's his design. He designed the guitar. He invented it. No, he didn't invent the guitar, but he invented the solid body electric guitar. You see, before that, electric guitars were basically big archtop jazz acoustic guitars with a pickup on them. And Les Paul experimented with pickups and that kind of stuff, amplification for his guitar, and found that you have problems with those types of electric guitars. Those big, full, hollow body guitars, you get a lot of feedback, and you don't have a lot of sustain. So he wanted to be able to play louder without getting feedback and to be able to have more sustain on the guitar. And he started experimenting. The man was an inventor. In fact, he's the only guy who's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Inventors Hall of Fame. And for good reason, because he invented a bunch of stuff, which I'll get to in a minute. But when it comes to guitars, he got a piece of railroad tie, put a pickup on it, put, a bridge on it, strung it up, just trying to see how clear a tone he could get. And he found he got a very clear tone. When you just have a big, heavy hunk of wood with the strings on it, it doesn't get all this acoustic resonance in it, like with an acoustic guitar, so you don't get feedback. You also, so that way you could turn it up louder. You also get a very clear, crisp tone, a very precise tone on a big, heavy hunk of wood like that, and you get a lot of sustain. However, it's impractical to carry around a railroad tie, right? So instead, he built a guitar called the Log, which is a 4x4 hunk of wood with a guitar neck on it, and he put a pickup on it and strung it up like a guitar and started playing around with that. You can carry that, right? You can play a 4x4. A railroad tie, not so much, but a 4x4, yeah. He was working with Epiphone at the time, kind of like developing these ideas. So what he did was he took an Epiphone guitar, cut it in half, and put the body parts on it so it looked like a guitar, right? But you weren't getting any acoustic resonance in that body. It was just a solid body guitar. People hadn't really done that up until then, So he was trying to get this licensed with Gibson, right? Gibson wouldn't do it. It kept saying no. And he had a friend, Leo Fender, who was not a guitarist. Oddly enough, the guy that started Fender Guitar Company, it wasn't a guitarist. He was an inventor. And Leo Fender tried to get Les Paul to go in with him on this endeavor to build guitars. Let's start a guitar company. And Les Paul didn't want to. He was still trying to get licensed through Gibson, who kept saying no. So Leo Fender started the Fender Guitar Company, and by 1950 developed the Fender Broadcaster, which later would be the Fender Telecaster, which is pretty similar to Les Paul's design. Not too surprising for you guitarists out there that have played around with a Les Paul and a Telecaster. They're both single-cut guitars. They're both pretty much just solid hunks of wood, not a lot of, you know, the traditional Les Paul and the traditional Telecaster don't have like the scoops, and, you know, the ergonomic design is just a hunk of wood, single cut, pickups, that kind of thing. Leo Fender did do something different though. He developed the idea of the bolt-on neck to kind of ease production, right? Helps you put them together more quickly, helps you produce guitars faster and more consistently, which is, you know, it's a great idea at the time. So Les Paul kept working on his guitars. Fender put out the Broadcaster and then the Telecaster. And Fender's company sold a lot of guitars. So by then, Gibson sees that and they're like, hey, maybe we missed the boat on this. Then they licensed Les Paul. And they put out the Gibson Les Paul that we all know and love. There's one other guitar called the Gibson Les Paul. After a certain number of years, I mean, that was in the early 50s, they started putting it out. At some point, I have notes here, but I'm not even bothered with it. I forget exactly when, but at some point they decided to trim the guitar down a bit and create a double cut design and put Les Paul's name on it. And Les Paul didn't like it, so Gibson changed the name to the SG. But those first, I think first year or two of SGs were also called Les Pauls. Except Les Paul did not approve of that guitar. So they continued to produce the Les Paul, and Les Paul continued to kind of like contribute to the evolution of the guitar that bore his name. And we still have Les Paul guitars today. That's why we know who Les Paul is. I mean, the guy invented the solid body electric guitar. And it's a guitar we still buy now with his name on it, the one he designed. But he did some other interesting things too. For instance, he helped to develop multi-track recording and overdubbing, which is another thing. Look at this. I have digital multi-track recording. Back in his days, it was on tape. They developed 4-track and then 8-track multi-track recorders. That was like a brand new thing back then. I mean, really brand new. Bing Crosby was pretty impressed by it. He recorded, I believe, recorded with Les Paul on his multi-track recorder. Sound on sound, they called it. And it was a total amazing innovation. But he did a couple other things too. He invented a phaser effect for guitars. He invented tape delay. He invented all kinds of stuff for the guitars. And that's who Les Paul was. Rather interesting life, rather interesting guy to look up. You can look up his Wikipedia page. I've read that, and I've gone over some other interesting little resources about Les Paul. Not necessarily for this video, just because I like learning about some of my favorite guitarists and inventors, and Les Paul is both. Is an interesting guy to check out. I'd recommend reading up some more on him, right? And definitely check out some of those clips of Les Paul and Mary Ford. They're worth watching. The guy was an amazing guitarist, especially when you consider what people were doing at the time. I mean, you can look up guitar, you know, stuff from the 40s, 50s, you know, that time period, and really see how head and shoulders above all of them Les Paul was. I mean, you might not be unduly impressed looking back at these videos. The same as for a lot of people, Eddie Van Halen doesn't seem that revolutionary because we've seen everything that's happened since and all the people that have used his techniques. But Les Paul was unbelievably influential. He was the first one to be doing a lot of these things on the guitar, and nobody sounded like him at the time. Although a lot of people sounded like him later. Finally, might as well end with the end. Let me look up the date here. August 12th, 2009. That's when Les Paul died of pneumonia, or complications from pneumonia. It had to do with pneumonia, unfortunately. We all go at some point. But he does have he's one of the few people that has a permanent exhibit up at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I'd like to visit someday. I've been to Cleveland like 3 times and haven't been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I really have to go up there sometime when I'm not doing something else, so I have time to do that. But anyway, yeah, he has a permanent exhibit there. And now you know a little bit more about Les Paul. Not just the guitar, but the person, right? You can thank a lot of our modern pickup designs to that guy. He helped design guitar pickups. He, helped develop multi-track recording. He developed the solid body electric guitars that we all know and love now. I imagine somebody else would have done it if Les Paul hadn't lived, but it was Les Paul. There you go. And now his name is on some very overpriced guitars. I wonder what his thoughts on that would be in the modern age, that Les Paul guitars mostly are so out of reach. Who knows? Maybe he wouldn't have cared. Anyway, I hope you found this video informative. It's just a little short bit. Man, most of the videos I've seen on Les Paul were a lot longer than this, but I'm keeping it short and to the point. If you like this video and you'd like to see some others, subscribe to my channel. In a sec here, there's going to be an end screen with playlists that come up. Check out they're in the corners. Check out my instrument reviews. You can see me review various guitars if you're interested. Mostly budget guitars that are affordable. And I got some songs. You should check them out, right? And I'll see you guys in the next video, all right? I love you guys. Peace out, baby. Bye-bye.